This session today is about starting your reflective diary. So what is a reflective diary? Well, basically it's a record, or it's an ongoing and continuous reflective evaluation of your experiences in coaching and mentoring. So what form does this diary take? Well, there are some key areas for you to think about. There are 9 of these areas, and they're up on your screen now, as you can see. I'm now going to go through each one of them in turn and discuss what they're about. So the first one is about your beliefs and your attitudes, as well as the coachee's beliefs or mentee's beliefs and attitudes. Think about how you cope with diversity yourself, how you cope with change, how you cope with somebody whose thoughts are not the same as yours, somebody's thoughts that you might find challenging or difficult. How do you deal with those? How does that affect the way in which you work? That's important to consider, because it's important to remember that a coach or a mentor tries to be non-judgmental of the person they're working with. Another key area to think about is how you manage yourself, how you deal with any emotions that your conversation generates for you, how you deal with any challenges that are in front of you with your mentee or coachee, how you behave in general, and how you control yourself and regulate your thoughts in order to do the very best job of facilitating your coachee or your mentee. It's the words that you use. What language do you use, and how do you use it? Do you keep your language simple? Do you ask multiple questions all at the same time? Or do you ask a single question and wait patiently for the response? And it's also important to think about the language that your mentee or your coachee uses. This is important because this will give you clues as to what they're thinking. Listen out for any figurative language that they might use, or metaphors, or symbolism, or repeated terms and repeated phrases. These are important because often a repeated phrase becomes something that is significant to talk about. For example, I was coaching somebody recently and they used the word retirement 10 times in about 5 minutes. So I said, tell me about this retirement word. And this unlocked a whole discussion. This was what they really wanted to talk about. So think about your language and think about their language. Your listening skills. How well do you listen? Do you give your mentee or your coachee sufficient time to think? Are you giving them space? Are you interrupting, or are you waiting for your turn to speak? Much better to try and concentrate carefully on what they're saying. Are you doing that? Make some notes and help you to think about that area. It's about your skills as a questioner. Are you asking multiple questions? Are you asking leading questions? Or are you trying to ask open questions? Questions which encourage the person to think and talk. Are you asking questions which challenge? Because they can be useful as well. Feedback skills. How are you giving feedback to your mentee, and under what some circumstances? And also, are you asking your mentee for feedback as well? That's important because in that way you will start to learn. But are you able to create a contract or ground rules between you and your mentee or coachee? That's very important because that becomes a reference point for later. Your ability to manage the process. Can you hold the process? Can you help to move through the process for the benefit of your coachee and mentee? Your ability to help your mentee or coachee plan for action and set goals. It's certainly not about you setting goals for them. It's about them creating their own. Can you facilitate this? Can you work with them so that they can do that effectively? So how do you keep your reflective diary? Well, first, you have had your coaching or mentoring experience. Describe what happened in the session. That's the first thing to do. Briefly describe it. The second thing to do is to decide on which of the 9 elements on the previous slides you're going to reflect upon. Now, it might be more than one, of course, but give yourself a focus of attention. Third, write what you noticed about what you did in the session, what you said, what your thought processes were, how you listened, how you questioned. Fourth, write what you noticed about your coachee and mentee. What did they say? What did they do? What did you notice about their non-verbal communication? And then ask yourself, how might I improve on this? What might I do differently next time to do better? And then finally, note your learning points and what you will do differently next time, so that when next you work with your coachee or mentee, you can change and you can develop and you can grow. And you repeat that for every single session. When you've completed all your 6 sessions with your mentee or coachee, look back over your reflections and ask yourself these questions. What have I learned about the coaching mentoring process? What have I learned about my skills, my techniques? What do I need to work on some more? You might have some books to help you review. What do the books say about the processes and skills and techniques that you have used? So in summary, there are 9 elements to reflect on in your coaching and mentoring practice. Describe what happened. Use the 9 elements to help you reflect. Ask, what did I notice about me? What did I notice about my coachee or my mentee? How might I improve? What are my learning points to work on? And after the 6 sessions, review and use books to help you think about what you've been doing. So what we're going to do now is thinking about what we might write in our reflective diary. And what I'm going to do is share with you some examples of how you might do that. So for example, on your screen now, it says, in the first session, we established ground rules. I used the Dimensions framework to help me do this with my coachee or mentee. So then, looking at the 9 elements of reflection, what I've done is selected some of those to help me reflect on that statement about establishing ground rules. So here they are. I've selected element 2, element 3, element 4, element 5, element 7 and 8. And as notes for myself, I've noticed that. For number 2, I took the lead to start by explaining the importance of ground rules. I needed to keep quite self-aware while I was doing that, and that meant I didn't need to go on and keep talking endlessly about the importance of these things. Make your point and move on with your coachee and mentee. If we take element 3, I tried quite hard to do this. In fact, I tried harder than I needed to. And this element 3 is about language. I tried hard to keep my language simple so as not to confuse, but I found that difficult and challenging. I needed to explain what I meant quite a few times to my coachee or mentee. That suggests that perhaps the language that we're using wasn't so simple, wasn't so straightforward, and you were perhaps trying too hard to be helpful. If we take element 4, I've reflected on that and I've thought about what went on in the ground rules session, and I've said to myself, listening seems to be much more of a thought process about the other person and what the other person is saying, rather than me simply waiting for my turn to speak. Now that seems to be quite an important insight that's being made here about the nature of listening. If we take element 5, I've confessed to myself that asking questions was difficult for me. I wasn't sure quite what to ask. However, I did notice, looking at element 7, that the contracting process or the ground rules process really got us off to a very good start. We had something to focus on, we had something to discuss. So it seems like quite a useful process to go through. And in fact, I did realise that starting off with something to talk about, like our ground rules and our contract between us, seemed to help me with element 5 in asking questions. In element 8, I tried hard to concentrate to complete the whole process. I was trying to pay attention to what my coachee and what my mentee said, and I was listening very hard. Concentration seems very important. So, what I noticed about my coachee. So what we've done first is what I noticed about me when I was working as the coach or the mentor. In this session, in this slide, is about what I noticed about my coachee and mentee. I noticed that my coachee was nervous and needed to stay calm, and I needed to stay calm to try and help them settle down. This is quite common, that your coachee or mentee might be nervous at the beginning. So it's important that you try to calm them down. Using element 3, keeping the language simple, when I eventually got around to keeping the language simple, seemed to help my coachee or my mentee to understand and to start to become more confident in what was going on. Element 4, my coachee seemed to want to talk quite a lot, and my silence that I used helped this to happen. Using element 5, when I did find an open question to ask, my coachee and my mentee seemed to gain confidence. The open questions seemed to encourage them to talk. And the contracting helped me to get the coachee and mentee to relax and focus, because I think it gave them something to talk about. So how might I improve? I need to think about my questioning technique and ask more open questions like, tell me about, what are your thoughts on something or another? More open questions is something that I'm going to try next time. I'm also going to try to control my nerves, because even though my coachee and mentee are nervous, I was nervous as well. So staying calm seems to be quite important. And listening also seems to be very, very important in the whole process. So I need to make sure that I concentrate hard on what my mentee is saying. So my learning points to work on, what I'm going to take away. Ask more open questions. Remember and trust the process that I'm working with, because the process kind of works. And try to focus on what my client or my coachee or mentee is saying, and don't interrupt them. Interruption is not helpful. Let them talk, let them finish, let them explore what it is in their own mind. So in summary, describe what happened, make a choice about the elements of reflection that you're going to make use of, ask yourself, what did you do? What did the client do? How might you improve? And what are your learning points to take you forward in this learning about coaching and mentoring skills?